Hi, I just posted a video a little bit ago, and it was on minimum wage. In order to afford a studio apartment, you'd have to make at least um, $19 an hour, and you'd have to be working at least 79 hours a week. 79 hours a week. Now, I did a video a while before that where I had asked why people are moving to Seattle. Not just why are they moving to Seattle, but why are people moving to Seattle and then finding out they can't afford it? Why are people not finding out they can't afford it before they move to Seattle? There's ways to find out what the cost is. Get on YouTube, look at videos, how much the rent's going to be. Um, Do you have a job already waiting for you in Seattle that's going to pay you all this glamorous money? Do you have all this money saved up already to where if you got to Seattle and you couldn't get a job right away, you would have a cushion to fall back on? You'd have to have at least 200 grand saved up to move to Seattle. If you cannot get that glamorous job, are you going to be okay working at Burger King? Have you thought of that before you moved? Or did you just up and move to Seattle thinking everything was going to be hunky dory because it's considered the Emerald City? Now, there was a video or an article that I came across, and it's entitled Millennials Complain They Can't Afford the Seattle Life That They Chose. Seattle residents KJ and JW. I'm not going to say their full names, but that's their initials. A young couple who were featured in the Seattle Times this last week. The two just bought a house that they can't afford and are now struggling with their mortgage payments, credit card debt, student loans. We're supposed to feel bad for these two. They want us to feel bad for those two, but really you can't. It's one thing if you were able to afford to live in Seattle and then you got pushed out. You can kind of feel sorry for people like that, but it says here that the person that made this article has said that his sympathy was running out for millennials who put themselves in financial tenacious positions. The couple isn't necessarily complaining, at least that's saved until the end of the original story. But the Times paint their story as a realistic view of the unfair lives for millennials. J and W are among the members of Seattle's millennial generation who are wrestling with such big ticket items as costly housing, student loans, before they have reached their peak earning years. Quoting a financial planner, the Times reports that young couples like them are between a rock and a hard place. We're supposed to sympathize with their struggles. We shouldn't. With respect, young couples are mostly between a rock and a hard place because they put themselves there, and that's very true. A lot of times people bite off more than they can chew. And that brings me to this. If you have a job and you make a certain amount of money and you end up getting a raise, most people start living like they got that raise. They don't live normal like they did before. They go out and buy a new car, or they buy a new truck, or they go search for a bigger house. Instead of being happy with what they have, instead of being happy with what they got, they go out and they buy the next biggest thing. You don't know for sure that that job's going to last. You don't know for sure that that raise is going to last. You got that raise, okay, now you got more bills. So really, that raise doesn't amount to nothing. This is me personally, just my personal opinion on the whole thing. Did God, and I'm bringing this in because it's my video and I can do this. I'm not trying to offend anybody when I say this, but I ask this question to people that just got a raise. Did God give you that raise to help you buy a bigger house or to help somebody that doesn't have a house get a house? What I mean is, whether it be a house or an apartment or a room for rent or whatever it may be, did God give you that raise to help you obtain more in life that you don't really need, or to help somebody obtain a life that they drastically need? Now, here it says that millennials and choices. Millennials and choices. The couple lacks an emergency fund. W, at 32, owes about $60,000 in student loan debt, and J makes just a modest income of $45,000 a year. Modest in this context at least. The reports also indicate credit card debt, and that based on their current retirement savings, they will not be able to sustain themselves after they leave the workforce. You work all your life, you head for retirement, and then you find out you got to still work because you can't afford to retire. They've decided to purchase a $550,000 house. They can't afford this house. Not only is it 72 years old, which will likely need to undergo maintenance, they had to take out a personal $30,000 loan from family members to cover a portion of the cost. Okay, here we go. You can't afford to get it, but you're bound and determined to get it. So you go and you borrow money that you cannot afford to pay back. If you can't, it's okay. It's only a reality because millennials are making really bad decisions. And yes, millennials are making bad decisions. People in general are making bad decisions. If you can't afford a house, don't buy one. If you can't afford high rent on Capitol Hill, don't live there. If you plan on getting into a career path with limited income potential, don't go to an expensive college. These are common sense and reasonable positions we should import to all millennials, but don't. Not only to millennials, but to everybody. We should impart that knowledge to everybody. But we're pretending otherwise. Actually, it's worse, they say. We're not taking any responsibility whatsoever, according to an article in the Times. It says Jay urged young adults to push back against the high cost of housing in college by telling public officials to address the problems. No. College is a necessity, depending on where you go. Community college, yes, a necessity. Private college, no, not a necessity, a luxury. If you can afford it, go. If you can't, go to college. Go to a public college, like community college. If you can't afford to live in a real fancy place, then you shouldn't be in that area. But as far as the rent goes, yes, I grant it. In Seattle, the rent is very expensive, and it should be brought down because the landlords are taking advantage, the property owners are taking advantage of everybody, and the city can't do nothing because the state tied their hands. And a lot of people don't take this into consideration when they're moving to Seattle from another area, another state, or another city. They live there. I've talked to several people that have moved, lived, couldn't afford to keep living, and they had to move. Put yourself in this position. There are much cheaper homes that you choose. Oh, my camera slipped. There are much cheaper homes that you choose not to buy, different career paths that you choose to ignore. Your position is not totally unfair. It is a position of your own doing, which is very true. It is a position of your very own doing. And but in Seattle, it's not always easy. Sometimes you have to take sometimes what you can afford. You have to take what you can get. And sometimes what you can get is not really that great of a deal. So if you can't afford it, don't do it. If you can't afford to live in an area, don't live there. And above all, before you move to Seattle, please figure this shit out before you go there. Make sure you can live there, because you're just cluttering up the works. If you go to Seattle and you find out you can't live there, you're cluttering up the works. And it's not fair to anybody else. It's causing the rent to go up, and it's causing the cost of living to go up. If you can't afford to be in a city such as Seattle, then stay the hell out. And on that note, this has been All Things Considered, because I consider all things. Good night, Seattle, and all points beyond.